In 1946, the Scottish Education Authority said that Scots was not the language of educated or cultured people anywhere. For decades, children in schools would receive corporal punishment. They would be beaten for using Scots words. Scots is perceived by many people as slang, bad English. It is seen as the language of people who are less intelligent, have less class, have less money, have less education. I know that you will not know every single Scots word of the day. I know that most people watching won't know every single Scots word of the day at the start of the video. But by the time I'm finished, you will know that word. So many people leave comments like this saying, I feel like I'm not Scottish enough, or I feel like I'm not really Scottish because I didn't know the words you've covered. And it makes me laugh because the odds were stacked against you from the start. From when you were very, very young to when you're an adult, all these different perceptions of Scots, all this history around the Scots language, all these different pressures and stakeholders and all these different opinions will have been all around you. Maybe you were brought up in a house like me that was tolerant of the Scots language, celebrated it and shared the words and phrases from a very young age. But maybe you grew up in a home that was not tolerant of Scots. Maybe you grew up somewhere that the Scots language was actively discouraged or mocked, somewhere that people believed using Scots words and phrases would be detrimental to your education, would harm your acquisition of the English language, would make you less likely to get a job, would make you someone that would be laughed at and mocked the same way that they were. Or maybe you grew up in a home that just didn't use Scots. That doesn't make you any less Scottish either. The sad thing about languages is it can be relatively easy to hurt them, to eradicate them. All you need to do is ensure that the language is not passed on to the next generation, and then you wait. You wait for the generation that knows everything, knows the grammar rules, knows how to conjugate, knows the words and phrases, the verbs and nouns and adjectives. You wait for them to die, and for the knowledge to die with them. There are so many words and phrases that I've come across that should have been shared, enjoyed, passed on, slung around a kitchen table, or shouted out in a classroom, or used in a formal context or a work situation, that have just sadly fallen out of use because of this attempted eradication. And I'm not saying that we have to go back to using all of these words that have fallen out of use, but what I'm saying is, you deserve to know them. You deserve to know they existed, and that they still exist, and that you can use them if you want to. And that's really why I started the Scots Word of the Day. It was partially so that I could share words that I knew, it was partially so I could learn new words, and it was partially so we could all nerd out about the Scots language, because the more I learn, the more I love, and I'm not done learning yet. But it is imperative to me that you do not feel any less Scottish because you don't know Scots words. Because, again, you weren't meant to know these words. These words were meant to die with our grandparents. These words are meant to die with our parents. These words were never supposed to be used or heard or shared or talked about or loved or celebrated. But they are. And the more that I talk to people around Scotland and in the various places where Scots is spoken, the more I realise just how varied and rich and beautiful it was and is. There's so much dialectal variation around Scotland. There's so many different chunks and factions and little linguistic communities and sub-communities that will absolutely blow your mind once you start learning about them. And people use that as a kind of way to say that Scots isn't a language, because how can it be a language if there's one word for one thing in one place and a different word for a different thing in another place? But that's amazing. The fact that we can have this language with such variation and still understand each other is amazing. I don't care if you call it a bairn or a wean. I just care that we're discussing children in Scots. And it's also important to acknowledge what words have been kept and preserved and what words you will know, because you'll know words like coorie, because that's what a mother or a father will have told children to do. You'll know words like tell, from mums shouting at their kids and going, I tell you. You'll know words like bringe, from dinna bringe, when you don't rush around. It's these imperatives, it's these verbs that are words that parents will use without thinking, despite being told from such a young age that they shouldn't use it. These are words that were used to admonish children, and these are words that were passed on despite parents not wanting to pass them on. The ultimate Scots word that everyone in Scotland will probably know is wheesht, and it means silence in its noun form. But we in Scotland, you'll know, will use this as be quiet, silence yourself, haud your wheesht, hold your silence. Imagine a parent trying desperately not to pass on the Scots language, but there's a noisy Wayne, there is a raucous child, and she wants to tell them off. So she can't help but say the language that she knows best, which is Scots, and she can't help saying, "Hod your wheesht." I just think that's magical. Despite people not wanting to pass on a language for fear and sadness and all this terrible negative emotion wrapped up in it, they cannot help but pass on the words that matter to them. And then there's the evocative words, the words that we use because we're in a situation that we just need to describe it. If something's dirty, it's mock it, it's clatty, it's clary. If it's stinking, it's bouffing, it's bogging. All these words, they just come out because we know no better way to articulate how we feel. And once you hear the words, you can use them. There's a kind of misconception about the Scots language that people feel like the language they grew up with, the dialect they grew up with, the way of speaking that they were raised is the only way they can use it, and anything else is inauthentic. But we would not say that about any other language. Say you're learning English and one day you learn the word stupendous and you think, oh my god, that's the best word I've ever seen. That's the best word I've ever heard and I will use it right now. And then someone tells you no, you didn't grow up using the word stupendous. It would be inauthentic for you to use it. Imagine, we would laugh at them. And rightly so, because any word that you like, you can use. For example, I grew up with coorie, you coorie, you snuggle, you cuddle, you coorie. But when I was speaking to my North East pals, they gave each other a bosie. A bosie is a cuddle, it's an embrace, it's something very intimate, the same way that coorie is. Now, I didn't grow up using bosie. I wouldn't have even known what bosie meant if you'd said it to me when I was a child. But as an adult, I can recognise and accept that bosie is quite possibly one of the best words for a cuddle. And I'll use it. Because bosie is a Scots word. And it's just as much my word as anybody else's, because I'm a Scots speaker. So this video has been exceptionally long. They very much should not have given me 10-minute long videos. And only now am I realising that this is probably a joke, and I have massively gone on a massive rant that you did not need, want, or expect. But I apologise for that. When you get me started talking about Scots, I can't stop. And again, 10-minute long videos should not have been a feature that was allowed to me. But to cut a long story short, nobody knows anything until they know it. And if you don't know a Scots word of the day before the Scots word of the day, that's fine. As long as you know it at the end. And if you don't know it at the end, then I've done a terrible job of conveying knowledge to you. At the end of each Scots word of the day, what I want you to do is consider, do I like this word? If yes, use it. If you want, stick it in a conversation. And if someone says, oh, what does that mean? You then get to pass on a word. And I'm sorry, but it's the most fun ever, you'll love it. And if you don't like it, don't use it. There's no pressure, I'm not forcing you. Just the same way as if you learnt an English word and thought, that's terrible, I'm never going to use that again. Apply the same logic. You've got this. And as ever, if you want to learn more about Scots, scotslanguage.com, which is the Scots Language Centre's website, has everything from games for children all the way up to links to an open university course. Every stage in the learning journey is catered for and you will have hours of fun. So to recap, the Scots language is amazing, you're amazing, have a nice day.